And welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Munoz, CEO of the experience agency, D-Flash. Each week, I bring a different business leader from a unique walk of life who's doing some game-changing work. And this week's episode is no different. I'm so excited to have Jen Willey, who's the CEO of Wet Cement, on the show. We're going to talk about all things business and how she got there and her incredible journey along the way. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're talking now during the time of everyone's sort of inside because of the coronavirus. And so part of the reason I'm doing more and more of these episodes is to connect more folks so you can have some time to learn from each other and take some good insights. So when we get out of this, we all get stronger together. So take a listen. Hey, Jen.
Hello there. I'm thrilled to be here with you virtually, as you had mentioned.
At some point, we'll meet in person, and there will be cocktails. So
I can't wait.
Don't worry. So you've listened to the show, as I heard. So I would love to hear your answer to the very first question, which is always the same. Jen, what was your first job?
So my real first job was I was a fitness instructor when I was not even old enough to be able to join the gym. At the age of 15, I started working as a fitness instructor back in the day of high impact aerobics and calisthenics and step and slide, when we would wear shiny spandex with a leotard and leg warmers. So that was where my journey to motivating others started at 15 years old. And that actually helped to put me through college, because that was where I was then fitness director at Cornell and actually a phys ed teacher. But my first, I'd say, adult job outside that truly was my career was I was a TV news anchor and reporter for an ABC affiliate in the Corning Elmira Ithaca market, which is a small market outside of where I had gone to college. And it was some way to just jump into a career, because I was 21 years old when I started doing it.
Oh yeah, so tons of experience, maybe that's what you're doing.
Tons of experience. And the interesting thing is I was very fearless at that time, because I didn't know of anyone who was my age who should have been on a certain trajectory or path along that way. I had no problem just going out and asking questions of the mayor or the governor, or stopping anyone along the way to talk to them. And it brought me along in my career much closer to where I am now, it was further along as I progressed and actually went into the business world and started to feel like the outsider, where all this fearlessness I had from being this, 15-year-old fitness instructor who could instruct dozens or hundreds of people much older than me, and being on TV. And all of a sudden I really switched and started to feel much less fearless than I did when I was younger, because I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm not as smart, or I'm not going as fast, or I don't know as much, or I don't fit in and I don't belong. And it started to change my whole mindset and approach to things. And it wasn't until, probably about 10 years ago, when I had made a number of different pivots along the way. So I went from TV news into consulting for PwC, was PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time. And
that's a switch.
it was a big switch. I decided that I wanted to get out of the news business for a number of different reasons, but most importantly, I got into it because I wanted to make an impact in the world. And what I found was, especially working in local news, all I was doing was covering tragedy. And I did not want to stick a microphone in somebody's face on the darkest day of their life and try to get them crying on camera. It was all about the public's right to know. And I said, you know what? No. That is a moment nobody else needs to know about. Hopefully no one else will ever feel that. And I don't need to stick this microphone in someone's face when they've just lost their child, their spouse, their mom, in the most horrifying of ways. And said, you know what? It was that combined with wanting to do something that was more intellectually stimulating. Because when you're writing for TV news, you are writing for a fourth grade reading level. And you would,
Wow.
I'd sit in a fascinating court case for 8 hours. And then they'd say, okay, Jen, you have 90 seconds to wrap up the whole day. And I could feel the brain cells dying by the moment. And I said, I want to do something more intellectually stimulating. And so I ended up working in entertainment and media strategy consulting for PwC. This was back in 1998 or so. And then I just had this career that I got plucked from thing to thing to thing, to working in business strategy, to help launch interactive TV at TV Guide. And then I got pulled from there to work in advertising, sales, and partnerships at Yahoo early on. And then it was just, again, pulled and pulled and pulled.
Wow.
Which is actually, it's interesting because it's one of those things I find now that I focus a lot on helping women achieve their potential professionally. I have seen as a common thread across female leaders that many of them do not have a very specific plan of where they want to go in their career. But because they're so smart and talented, but they don't necessarily self-promote or advocate for themselves, all the other smart people around them say, oh, she's really good. I'm going to take her here. I'm going to take her here. I'm going to take her here. And then you fast forward 20 years and you have a whole bunch of women who are totally burnt out going, how the bleep did I get here? This isn't even what I want to do. So yeah, so it's been an interesting journey along the
way. So it's, you have such a fascinating company. And so what made you decide to start Wet Cement?
Well, thank you. I do think the work that we do is fascinating. I'm more intellectually stimulated than I've ever been in my life. It was about a decade ago when I had recognized, I was at AOL and I had the opportunity to move into a new role. And I was deciding between two different jobs. And one seemed like it would be, again, really challenging and help me get to that next level. But something where I felt I didn't have all the job requirements and all the experience necessary to get there.
Uh-huh.
And the other one was more of a lateral move. And I sat down with my boss at the time, amazing leader, Tim Costelli, who's now at iHeart. And when I told him that I was not going to go for the more challenging, interesting role as industry practice head for CPG and health globally at AOL, he said to me, first off, are you kidding? What's wrong with you? Why would you not take the job that you want more, that you find challenging? And then he said, help me understand why. And I said, well, I feel like I'm about 70% qualified for that. So I am going to let somebody who's 100% qualified go take that job. And he picked himself off of the floor because his mouth was basically on the floor. Like, what's wrong? And then what he said to me was, that is the difference between a man and a woman. A man would say, I'm 70% qualified, so I'm definitely taking this job. He might even say, right. He might even say, I'm 30% qualified, so I'll get in that job and I'll make up that 70%. And here you are, knowing our people, products, policies, everything that we need in this company, and you're going to let somebody from the outside come in and take this from you. And so that started this journey for me over the last decade of really trying to understand, first of all, gender differences in the professional world and our mindset at work, and then fearlessness in general. And what were some of those differences? Because I started off talking to many of the male friends I have and female friends, and most of the women understood how I felt about saying like, oh, well, if you don't really feel you're ready for it or you're not really qualified, but every man was like, what is wrong with you? Of course you should take it. And so at that point, I started helping to build women's leadership networks and serving on the board for the Alliance for Women in Media. And it became a bigger and bigger passion for me with time. And then I was at WebMD and I was the founder and chairwoman of their women's leadership program. And I just had this aha moment. And granted, I had a lot of health issues all come in like 1 48-hour period, which gives you that clarity in life.
Of course, right? You have that thing that happened.
Yep, that sense of purpose of like, I don't know how long I'm going to get on earth, but I need to spend the gift of time that I get every day trying to not focus on the latest digital media and marketing trends and ad products that are out there and how do I motivate a team to do that. But I need to focus on how do I help people achieve their potential, men and women, men being modern male leaders and more fearless leaders, and women to understand what are those internal barriers that we have, aside from those external barriers that are out there. But what are those internal things that we have that are holding us back? And then helping them learn techniques and methods and mindsets to help them overcome that. And so then I finally said 2.5 years ago, you know what? I've got to put all my energy into this and just do it.
And so you take the leap to go into this bat-knit world of entrepreneurship. Welcome. Isn't it fun?
Thank you.
And isn't it terrifying, especially now? And how do you start? What's the thing to get that first client?
That's a funny question. I will say it was a terrifying leap. I am married and I have 2 almost teenagers at this point, 13 and almost 16. But my husband was a stay-at-home parent for the last 11 years. Or at that point, it was almost 10 years that he was the stay-at-home parent.
Wow.
We did not know any other stay-at-home parents at the time we made the decision to do that. But my career had taken off enough that and he's a news videographer. Now he's freelancing again with WPIX in New York. But at the time, we just said he was leaving for work at 1 a.m. We were struggling to try and ever even see each other, both exhausted. And we just said, let's make that leap. So it's funny because when people first heard about me starting my own business, they're like, oh, that must be so nice to have a husband who can support your entrepreneurial journey. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm the sole breadwinner in my family. So that is a ridiculous belief and story that we tell ourselves, that any woman who's starting a business has to have a man or spouse or partner behind them to make
or trust fund or something. Yes,
that's exactly right. So, but he was behind me, just not financially, but he's my biggest supporter and greatest champion. But so that's why, yes, it was especially a leap. But the way I made that leap is I'm a very big believer now in manifesting your destiny. At the time, I was the chief business officer for a health tech company called Independa. And I was speaking at a conference on connected health. And I just had this moment where I recognize I should be so proud that I'm the only woman on this panel speaking about this incredibly interesting topic. My whole career was about innovating and doing what's next. But I felt like this is not where I should be right now. Like, this is not my passion. And I just had this moment of saying, it was October of 2017. And I told myself, I have got to, by January 1st, like CES, Consumer Electronics Show, I want to be able to start my own business by CES and just go and just do it and take that leap. And as I walked out of being in that panel, in that room, I ran into an old colleague of mine, Jack Barrett. I'll always be so grateful to Jack Barrett, because I ran into him and he goes, how's everything going at the company there? And I said, well, things are good. It's very interesting. I said, but I don't think this is going to be a long-term solution for me. And he said, well, what's next? I said, I'm starting my own consulting company. And I had never said those words out loud. I had just decided this 5 minutes earlier.
Yep, that's how it always is.
That's exactly right. And he said to me, that's the best news I've ever heard. I want to be your first client.
Wow.
And he was. And so it's that manifesting your destiny and believing in yourself and saying it out loud so the universe can validate you and people can say, I want to be a part of that. So that's how I got started.
That's incredible. Yeah, I talk about this all the time. It's like, just say it. What is the worst that can, if you've gotten out there, like when this podcast came out of probably the craziest time separate of right now in our business. And I just was like, well, let's just start a podcast. All right. And then 2 weeks later, I get invited to a lunch, and it's with a podcast producer who I had to speak at an event that I produced. And because when I do my events, I'm always like, oh, hi, you're blah, blah, blah. You should say hi to this person. Go run along, go chat. I had no idea that the person that I introduced him to would then hire him for a monster contract. And so the reason he was taking me to lunch was to thank me for that introduction that I just made because you all were sitting there. Don't sit there by yourselves. And then I saw about the idea for the podcast, and I'm like, but yeah, like there's never been a podcast that has women on it that isn't about like, it's like not struggle porn or blah, blah, blah. Or like, it's crushing it and it doesn't give the honest truth. And he's like, yeah, do that. I was like, I know, I should. He's like, I'll produce it for you. And I'm like, oh, so, and that's how we started. So you have to say it. It's also the thing about like people being able to understand the importance of validating your own crazy. Like oftentimes you're not actually crazy. It's like, because if you say it and you hear it yourself, you're like, actually, I can totally do that. Why don't I do that? Nobody else has. And even if they have, no one will do it like me. I think oftentimes with women in business especially, we get this weirdness whereby like, well, blah, blah, blah is doing it, so I can't go and do it like them. I'm like, well, you're not going to do it like them. You're going to do it your way. And your way is pretty awesome.
I couldn't agree more. I went to this, I spoke at this women's purpose summit. And one of the exercises that we did was around limiting beliefs. And at the time, I participated in the exercise, and I said, my limiting belief is that there's a lot of other incredible women out there doing somewhat similar kinds of things to me. And so it makes me feel like, you know what? Some cases, I'm already a few years behind them. Why am I even bothering? And someone else had said to me, which was just, I love sharing this because it's so true. Do you have a lawyer? And I said, yes. And they said, is he the only lawyer in America? And I said,
Perfect.
no. And it was just that immediate light bulb of course, just because someone else may be doing something, if anything, that should only validate the idea.
Yeah, because they're doing it. So why can't you?
That's right. You just do it in your flavor. And that can be all the difference it takes.
I think that's really, really important. I think, especially now in this time period, I think there's two sides of the house. Either people are super productive or sitting on their couch. And I'm on the somewhat productive, somewhat sitting on the couch. Because I don't want, my idea is like not to go too hard too soon. That like, this is obviously a big deal. This is obviously a game changer for every industry that we're all in. If you interact with people, like you're at home right now. So for you, now is the time to sort of write down those ideas, say them out loud. Why not? I mean, it's funny, like I was having a similar conversation with my coach yesterday about this. And because I was like, oh, what are we going to do? And because half our business is events. So we're like, whoa. So I'm like, oh, we'll figure this out. And he was like, well, don't you have like 4 key traits that you always like talk about? And I'm like, yeah. So I named the traits. He's like, so why don't you just work on those? And it's like the similar, the shoemaker's shoes kids have no shoes. I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. Why didn't I just do that? And then started writing that song yesterday. So, we all have these moments of like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know. And especially now. So it'd be lovely to hear, like, what are you sort of doing in this time period to sort of like center, focus, and build for the new tomorrow?
So I think it's such an important question right now. I had absolutely that breakdown moment when this all started, of the fears starting to come into me. And then I reminded myself, my whole platform, just like you're talking about, and everything I care about is about fearlessness. And so how do I focus on being more fearless? It's about taking control of what I can control. And so in my view of the world, it's all about filling up the karma jar. And the karma jar is putting others first and being in service and being authentic and true to yourself as you're doing that. And I have this very strong belief you can be selfless to be selfish, and it will come back to you. So what I'm doing for myself and what I'm advising some of my customers and people I'm coaching to do as well is think about, what are your strengths? What are the gifts that you have to give to the world? And then how do you put that out there to help other people right now? Again, in a way that's authentic and true and genuine to who you are. So the first thing I did was I said, I need to take control in some way. I am that total extrovert that needs to be around other people. And I'm like, I can't just be in my house 24/7. So the first thing I did was I said, okay, we're going to do a water cooler segment where we'll just bring people together to talk about all of these fears that we have. And then how do you start putting some steps in place to stay positive and take control of the situation and be able to manage as best as possible through it. And another thing we're good at is doing research and gathering intelligence and then boiling that down in ways to make it really easy to understand and actionable for people. So immediately I said, okay, let's create a resource guide that's focused on the 5 key areas that right now we think everybody needs to be focused on. First and foremost, your mindset and mindfulness around that. Secondly, your family, because I'm starting with mindset and yourself, because it's just like with an airplane. If you do not put that oxygen mask on first, you cannot save anybody else around you. So get your head on straight, figure out how do you take care of yourself through self-care activities and mindfulness and meditation. Then family being a big part of that. Then focusing on health and wellness. So aside from the mental health piece, but physically active, exercising, nutrition. So not just eating cookies and saying like, oh, the world is ending, because it's not going to end. We will get through this. And you want to be in good health. And the healthier you are right now, the healthier you will be getting through this. Then I get to the place of work and mindset around your career or your business if you're an entrepreneur. And then the 5th component that we looked at was happiness and fun, because we still need that in order to stay sane through all of this. And so we put together this resource guide across those 5 areas. And now when we're doing the water coolers, again, it's just a free thing that's open to anyone who wants to come together. We say to stay calm, cool, and connected during this time. And we use interactive tools to get everybody to weigh in and share what their mindset is and what's keeping them up at night and where do they need help and what's making them happy, and helping people create a plan for joy and happiness in their day. Because I'm hearing way too many people who are just so consumed with the news that they are not taking advantage of this. That's exactly right. So it's about identifying, what are those, I love the metaphor of if you had the jar and you had rocks, pebbles, and sand that you could fill that jar up with. The only way you can get all that stuff in there is if you put the rocks, the big things that matter to you first, into that jar. Then you get to the pebbles, which are the smaller things that get you through it. And the sand to me is the minutia. That's the emails. That's the worrying about the laundry or the this or the that doesn't really improve your life in any way. And so take time out right now and think about, what are those rocks? What are those things that when your kids and grandkids ask you about this time, because this is, I think, going to be one of those milestone moments in history that people talk about. You do not want to just say, oh, I use that time to clear out my inbox. And boy, I binge watch a bunch of different shows that I don't even remember the name of. I'm not saying you should not sit on your couch at all. I started watching some new shows that I am totally enjoying. And I never normally take that time to sit down and watch or binge watch. So that was actually on my list of just relaxing a little bit. But it's identify what are those rocks. And those rocks could be anything from reestablishing relationships with people who matter in your life. Those rocks could be writing that book or starting that podcast that you want to do. Those rocks could be finding some fun new project, like learning how to play the guitar, or reinvigorating your love for knitting, or like the head of MTV Music, someone awesome that I learned on one of your previous podcasts.
Oh, yes.
Or painting, or something that you can walk away with this, that you'll always be able to say, gosh, while there were terrible things that happened during that crisis, here were some of the new things that I am so grateful that this changed in my life, and that you want to keep with you after this time.
It's awesome and so key. It's like, it's like you can't let your brain become mush, but you also can't become so productive. I mean, I think last week, the deluge of emails, or everyone was like, and note from our customers, oh, we are here with you. We are standing. And I just I cannot. It's like, enough. I think the most important thing for a lot of this stuff is that people have to remember the humanity of it all. Like, this is a shock. And it is not something anyone, like a friend of mine, was reminding me, over the weekend, it was a month ago, we were having my 40th birthday party. And it was at this club in Midtown, and we had 40 people, and we had all champagne and booze, and the idea of being around 40 people right now is what? No. And so you imagine what can happen in a month. And so you have to sort of give yourself that break, but also use this time to be productive and finding those things that matter. It's like, you can totally write the book. You can also watch Fast and Furious, which is what actually I did yesterday. Those movies are crazy and so dumb, but it's like the perfect palate cleanser, because you're like, oh, Vin Diesel's kind of hot. But very much give yourself this break to figure out what you're good at, but also to say it out loud. I think definitely manifesting it is going to be the key for a lot of this, where you say it and you write it down, you're going to be more apt to actually do it.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you 2 tips that I shared in the last segment that we did. One was on to minimize the news consumption. Create a plan of when you're going to check in on what's happening in the news. So maybe it's first thing in the morning when you get up to see if there was any major outbreak or something that you need to know about. Maybe one time in the middle of the day and one time in the evening. And when you do, use your phone and set a timer for 10 minutes. So to give you that reminder of, do not get sucked into that black hole of reading and reading and reading and reading. And next thing you know, 3 hours has passed by. And now you're just filled with more anxiety and not using that in any productive way. So minimize that, use your phone, set a timer for whatever time feels right to you. And then on the productivity and happiness side, schedule that into your day. Time block it in your calendar. If you put an hour in there for writing the book, or taking the bath, or going for the walk, or learning to play the guitar, or whatever that is, time block that in. It takes you 2 seconds to put a recurring calendar appointment in, and it will just remind you, set aside that time for doing those things that matter, those big rocks.
So I think, you've put it in a really impactful way. It's just what you would do if you were at work. Put it in your calendar, because you know what happens when it's in your calendar. You will do it. We're all Pavlov when it comes to this. So when we hear the ding 10 minutes before, oh, wait, I have to do this thing. So it's so true. So, it's interesting. So what would you tell 25-year-old Jen, looking back on all the stuff that you've done over the last few years of your career?
So for me, my conversation with 25-year-old Jen would definitely be around imposter syndrome. And that feeling of being the fake, the fraud, not good enough. I was really, really hard on myself. And because of that, I would say, elevate myself and others as much as I could have along the way. And it wasn't until I really understood that I was not alone in this. It was actually when I started the Women's Leadership Network at WebMD, where we brought in a speaker who was wonderful, Kira Copperman, who talked about imposter syndrome, where I thought, oh my God, is she been reading my diary? Like, how does she know that this is how I feel? And as soon as I heard about that, again, started doing more research around imposter syndrome and that mindset of feeling like, you have to work harder than everyone else, and that if you ask for help, that you'll be found out. Always looking for that external validation rather than internal validation. So I would be juggling a million balls in the air so I could prove to as many people as possible that I was worthy. And then that would result in me being burnt out time and time and time again. And the funny thing is, I got the same exact employee, when I would get my annual review, I'd get the same feedback every time. Jen, you're an A+ player. We want you to take it down to a B-, because you're burning yourself out. You're burning other people out around you, because I had these incredibly high standards. And when I would get the feedback about that, I would think, okay, these people don't have standards high enough for me, because they want me to be a B- player. And I have a reputation. People have certain expectations of what they get when they work with me and my teams. And I look back now and I think, oh my goodness, they were all right. They were all right. I should have been striving in some ways for the B-, because my B-, and this is what they say, your B- is everybody else's A+. But you're working so hard. And now I know the terminology around it. It's the imposter syndrome competence type of perfectionism combined with superhero competence type, where you're so focused on getting to that 100% that you're driving yourself and other people crazy, and you never enjoy the success. And so now when I am training...
You froze.
What was that?
Oh, no.
Are we back? Lori, you still there? Lori, you still there?
That was crazy.
Are we back?
Yeah. You were like, for a good 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness. And you were like this, because you were like, I heard you. You're like, you just froze. And then you stuck like that. So I don't know what happened. I clearly have not moved.
Zoom look, think of the hundreds of millions of people who are using Zoom right now. I'm surprised it's even working. So we can't even bitch. But you were just saying about imposter syndrome and how you figured out that you have a superhero complex, and then you froze.
Yes. So I finally recognized I had a combination of the superhero competence type combined with the perfectionist competence type. Actually, I have all 5 of them. But once I finally started to understand that and recognize that and think about how do you then create strategies for overcoming that, now my big message to everyone and almost all the workshops and coaching that I do is around the 80% rule. So not the 80-20 rule of, 80% of your business comes from 20% of your clients, but the 80% rule of just take the leap, go for it when you're at that 80% level. And so whether it's because you need as a company to innovate and be more agile, once you get into that 80% mindset to say, I know this isn't perfect yet, or I know I'm not perfect yet, but because I know that, I can constantly look for how do I iterate and improve? iterate and improve, iterate and improve. So I'm constantly bringing up the bar on the 80%, but I will make mistakes. I will not have all the answers. And so I become more comfortable then just taking the leap off the cliff when I feel like, okay, we're about 80% of the way there, and then we'll just keep improving with time.
Awesome. And so necessary. So, two questions. One, how did you figure out all those personality types? And is there a test so we can tell people to go take? Because I feel like there's lots of people who have bad press, company included. I don't have imposter syndrome. I always feel weird when I say that because I feel like as a woman in business and a woman of color, they're like, well, of course you do. Like, yeah, no, I don't. But I definitely have superhero complex because I'm always going to save people because don't do that. You're stupid. I can save you. So if you know where we can take those tests, I would.
So I would definitely recommend. So imposter syndrome was first, let's call it, discovered by Clance and Imes, gosh, about 40 years ago or so. But there is a fabulous book by Valerie Young called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women that I would strongly recommend for anyone who's listening to this. And that will definitely help. We also at What Cement, we do a series of videos called Fearless in 5. They're all free. They're on wet-cement.com. And it's 5 things you can do to be more fearless at work and in life in 2 minutes or less. And we've got a lot of content on there as well around imposter syndrome and how it manifests and what are then some of the things that you can do to start to self-manage and overcome, again, both in yourself as well as with your teams, because that's one of the things that I'm so passionate is about helping people not only be able to regulate and identify and then manage and self-lead to say, okay, I'm recognizing I'm doing this behavior. What am I going to do right now to pull myself out of this? Because it's a habit. And you know, the research on habits that's out there, another great book, Charles Duhigg and The Power of Habit, is there's a cue or a trigger. Then there's the behavior, the routine that you do to get some kind of reward or incentive. And so as soon as you get that cue that normally starts you in that routine or that mindset or the behavior, if you can recognize, okay, I can't change the pattern in my brain of the cue and the reward, but I can change the behavior of what I'm going to do to get that incentive, then you can start to do things different. So again, if your normal feeling is like, I want to get this to be perfect, and you know, you do the review and you're like, gosh, we're almost there. That's the cue. Then you can say, okay, wait, rather than slowing myself down and trying to find more and more and more, I'm actually going to get going. And I'm going to put this out there and I'm going to get input instead, rather than waiting for it to be perfect so that nobody can tell me it's imperfect. I'm going to put it out there and say, this is imperfect. Help me make this better. And then you get the reward actually that much sooner and quicker at the same time.
Awesome. It's like the beta test. It's like, just get the beta out. Just get it out. And you will iterate. It's totally fine. So, especially in this crazy ass time, what in the world are you doing for your self-care?
I am definitely doing a lot of Zumba. I am doing it.
Really? In 2020, you're doing Zumba.
In 2020, I am doing Zumba. That is my happy place. I know it's very it's probably like very 2010.
Early aughts.
About 10 years off. But I've been doing it ever since. It's my way that I can imagine that, like, I am in the Caribbean and I am dancing with my girlfriends on the dance floor. And I love it. And in this crazy time, I will give a huge shout out to all my favorite Zumba instructors at Crunch in Marlborough, because what they have started doing is live streaming Zumba classes from their own bedrooms and garages and everything else. They started unpaid. They weren't charging anyone. They were just like, we know all of you need this right now and you look forward to this. So a whole group of these instructors got together, created a Facebook group, and they're all doing it for free. So again, trying to think about the karma jar. I was like, you're angels for doing this. So I started a movement for all of them to say, tip your instructor, $3 a class. Use Venmo or PayPal, and I got all the instructors to put their information so that everyone now can pay them for their work. And so now they're not doing this for free anymore. They're actually making more money streaming from their garage than they would get paid for a class. So I'm doing a lot of Zumba. And I am also, my big self-care thing right now is trying to sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, which I see such a difference in how I handle the anxiety that comes along with the time that we're living in right now. When like those nights I get 8 hours of sleep, I'm like, whatever, I can deal with anything that comes my way. And so that's been really important for me.
Awesome. Yeah. Look, definitely the sleep. I feel like I am definitely sleeping longer and more soundly, and just like, yep, shutting us off, and because you need it. And I also, it's like I read somewhere, someone said that Mother Nature knew we needed a break.
I love that.
And so that's why this is all happening. And so like people are sleeping more. The earth is regenerating itself. Because remember, there's nobody going through canals and waters and such. So they're replenishing and cleaning themselves out, and no one's destroying the rainforest because everyone's sitting inside. So as of anything, it is a time for sort of rebirth and cleansing and getting back to what matters. So I would agree with you. So since you've inspired the karma jar, and since I have done the thing called the give and the ask, which what I did for my 29 days of magic, you've now inspired me to restart it, Jen. So
wonderful. Good. I'm happy to hear that.
You're going to be the first one back up. So do you have a give or an ask of the audience?
So my ask of the audience is, and I'm going to talk to all the women who are listening. I'm sure there are men listening as well, because I love these podcasts and they're amazing. They're so chock full of great things. But I'm really talking to the women because we just finished a new wave of research around fearlessness at work, looking at patterns for all employees from basically middle management. Okay. And what is so fascinating to me, if we look at all employees, but then we also look at the differences of how men and women respond at work. And there's a lot of ways that we are the same. So, and some of the things that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. So some of the ways we're the same, we all feel just as empowered at work. Women, a tiny little bit less than men, but not even statistically significant. When it comes to the career ladder and aspiring to the same levels of success, we are right there with each other. We're also right there with each other of feeling like we're at a lower level than we should be. We are the same when it comes to feeling like we belong at work. So there are a number of these places where we are very similar, but there are some major differences in men and women at work. And this is my ask of everyone. So first and foremost, women, it's interesting because one of the things I am obsessed with is confidence at work. And that was a big part of everything that we do at What's Meant. And what we found is that women have actually more confidence outside of work for non-work behaviors than men do. But when it comes to work behaviors, that's where they have less confidence. So people just make these like overarching statements like, oh, women are less confident than men. That is not true. But in many cases, and what we're seeing from the research, they are less confident when it comes to work. And then what that translates to is also women feeling more anxiety in the workplace because they feel less confident in things. They're more likely to feel anxious than men who feel or less confident at work. So what that does is it translates into not taking career advancing behaviors. So there are 6 things that women are not doing at the same level as men. First off, they're not negotiating. They're not negotiating for their own best interests. They're not negotiating their salaries, and they're not negotiating business deals at the same level as men do. And again, this is all from the research that we just completed with some incredible, brilliant minds from Wharton, Harvard, and Cornell. They are not taking risks to help their career grow as quickly. Women are more likely to hesitate to speak up in group meetings. I'm sure that's not a shock to anyone for those of us who have been in group meetings, but the research is showing it's true. Women are less likely to initiate difficult conversations with colleagues. Women are less likely to share their most creative and unique ideas. And women are less likely to self-promote. And what's really fascinating for me, and gets to the ask, is that while women and men, according to the research, have the same levels of being mentored by other people. So what we saw is about 22% of men and women have mentors, but men are mentoring others at a much higher level than women are. So 34% of men mentor other people, 25% of women mentor other people.
That's interesting.
And that to me is the ask. Every woman listening to this, if you have been out of college for 2 years, go find yourself somebody to mentor. Ideally, a woman and a man. Because if we don't start mentoring the next generation, first off, it's a self-perpetuating problem that we are not getting those skills of all those career advancement behaviors I just talked about, of negotiating and taking risks and having difficult conversations. We're not helping others see how to do that. But the other thing is, if we're not mentoring others, we're not helping ourselves. It's a karma jar thing again. Really fascinating research that just came out this year from Wharton and Booth shows the research study. They asked people, if you have a problem or an issue with something, would you feel more confident if you got expert advice from someone on that topic, or if you had to give advice to someone else on the same topic? And everybody, for the most part, said, I would feel more confident if I got advice from an expert. When they actually did the research, what they found was people became more confident and actually developed better strategic thinking when they gave advice to someone else. So whatever that thing is that you are struggling with, go find someone else to mentor who needs help with that, and help them think through and give them advice and help them think strategically about how do they solve those problems. So that is my ask. Go mentor someone today. Mentor two people, men and women. Men need to be mentored by women. So this is not just women helping women. This is women helping men, which will help women.
Awesome. That's a pretty phenomenal ask, Jen. Come on. It's wonderful. I'm going to throw that in our show notes as well so that folks can follow along and get all of your great fearless tips on your website and the books that you mentioned. Because I think, again, we all got the time now. So let's use it and be smart about it. But thank you so very much for being on our show. I mean, we could talk for hours, we probably will. But it's just a delight to have you on the show and
thank you.
Incredible story. It's going to help a lot of people. So thank you so very much.
Well, it is my pleasure and honor. I totally enjoyed your podcast, and you are just an inspiration to women, of course, but leaders everywhere. So thank you for doing this and for helping women, and especially women of color, share their incredibly important stories. There's not enough of that. And as a student of fearlessness, the most fearless women I admire are all Black women. So it is true. And so I love hearing them share their stories and their mindset. So thank you for being you.
Oh, thanks, Jen. And that is our show.